They say history is shaped by presidents, generals, and spies trained in the darkest corners of intelligence agencies. But sometimes, history turns on the actions of someone nobody ever expected. Someone in a paper hat. Someone standing under bright fluorescent lights, wiping a counter, taking orders, hearing the same bell ring again and again. This is the story of how the Cold War's invisible war, the War of Secrets, was shaken by a single, ordinary McDonald's employee. A person with no badge, no clearance, no idea that one small observation would quietly unravel a Soviet spy ring that had been hiding in plain sight. It begins in the late Cold War years, when fear moved silently through everyday life. The Soviet Union and the United States were not firing bullets at each other, but they were watching, listening, waiting. Every phone call could be tapped. Every stranger could be an agent. And every routine was a perfect cover. Fast food restaurants of all places were the last locations anyone suspected. They were symbols of normal life. Bright, loud, predictable. Exactly the kind of place where nobody looked twice. Inside one such McDonald's, tucked into a busy American city, an employee noticed something strange. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just strange. The same group of men kept coming in. Always together. Always calm. Always polite. They ordered the same meals, sat in the same corner, stayed longer than normal customers, and spoke quietly in a language the employee didn't recognize. At first it meant nothing. People are creatures of habit. Regular customers exist everywhere. But patterns, when you work long shifts, begin to stand out like fingerprints. These men never joked. Never checked the menu. Never rushed. They didn't behave like friends meeting casually or coworkers grabbing food. They behaved like professionals. The employee began to notice the details. Their eyes scanned the room before they sat. They positioned themselves so they could see entrances, exits, reflections in windows. One would always arrive a few minutes late. Another would always leave first. Most customers came to McDonald's to escape the world for 10 minutes. These men looked like they were working. Cold War intelligence relied heavily on non-official cover agents, spies with no embassy job, no obvious government ties. They lived normal lives. They blended in. They met in ordinary places, precisely because intelligence agencies assumed ordinary people would never notice. But this employee did notice. One night after closing, curiosity turned into something heavier. Not fear. Concern. The employee mentioned it casually to a manager. The manager laughed it off. Probably students. Maybe engineers. Maybe tourists. But the visits continued. Weeks turned into months. Then something small happened, something that changed everything. One of the men accidentally left behind a folded piece of paper. Not trash. Not a receipt. Something carefully folded, quickly retrieved once they realized it was missing. The employee didn't read it. Didn't touch it. But the reaction mattered. These men were trained to never leave anything behind. That night, the employee made a decision that would ripple through intelligence agencies on both sides of the Iron Curtain. They reported the behavior not to a manager, but to a local authority, framing it as something unusual. That report didn't trigger alarms immediately. But intelligence work is patient. Analysts listen. They connect dots. Federal investigators quietly began watching the McDonald's. They didn't disrupt. They did confront. They simply observed. And what they saw confirmed the employee's instincts. The men used coded behavior. They rotated seating positions. They avoided consistent eye contact with staff. They timed their arrivals to avoid surveillance patterns. Eventually, faces matched old photographs. Travel records surfaced. Aliases overlapped. These were not random customers. They were part of a Soviet intelligence network using public locations to exchange information, confirm instructions, and maintain contact without electronic communication. No radios. No phones. Just burgers, fries, and human behavior. The irony was brutal. A symbol of American capitalism had become a meeting point for Soviet espionage. Over time, investigators traced the network outward. Apartments, mail drops, employment fronts. What began as a strange feeling behind a counter led to the quiet dismantling of an entire spy ring. No arrests were made publicly at first. Cold War diplomacy demanded silence. Some agents were expelled. Others vanished back behind the Iron Curtain. Careers ended. Lives were reshuffled. And the employee? They were never named in headlines. Never interviewed on television. Never celebrated as a hero. They simply returned to work. Back to the counter. Back to the routine. That's how intelligence history often works. The most important moments happen quietly, unnoticed by the world. The Cold War wasn't only fought in war rooms and embassies. It was fought in grocery stores, bus stops, parks, and yes, fast food restaurants. This story matters because it reminds us of something deeply human. Spies rely on invisibility. But invisibility only works when nobody is paying attention. And sometimes, the sharpest eyes belong to the people society overlooks the most. The student, the clerk, the cashier, the McDonald's employee who trusted their instincts and unknowingly stepped into the hidden war between superpowers. History didn't change with a gunshot that day. It changed with a question silently asked behind a counter. Why do they always sit there? And in the Cold War, that was enough.